Morning all, it's the rest day today in the World Championship candidates, the 20th of March 2014. Yesterday there was another very exciting game which I'd like to look at. It was Mamedyarov playing white against Peter Svidler. Mamedyarov kicked off with d4 and Peter Svidler actually played a very exciting opening, to his great credit, where usually most people are playing now the Grunfeld, which has been heavily popularized by Peter, or the Slav defense, or something like that. But he actually played the Dutch defense, so f5. Very controversial first move by Super GM standards nowadays, although Khanty-Mansiysk seems to have a liking for the Dutch defense. I think one of the biggest exponents at the moment. So Mamedyarov plays g3, and actually the particular variation of the Dutch defense is something I quite enjoy playing, called the Leningrad Dutch defense, where black plays a fast g6, a fast fianchetto here, and often the plan is something like this: castling queen e8, e5, e4, trying to close in this bishop. Simple sort of plan, sort of default plan to consider when playing the Leningrad Dutch. Okay, so white plays knight f3, bishop g7, both sides castle, c4, d6, knight c3, and the standard sort of plan in the Leningrad, queen e8. So black would really like to play e5, e4 here. White now played a very unusual move actually. Usually now d5 is a key move in the position. Over 1400 games with d5 in this position. And 383 with b3, also even knight d5, 280, rook e1, 244. This next move is just really rare, and I didn't understand it myself, to be quite honest, because usually against this plan, this diagonal is quite sensitive, and usually if white wants to kind of make use of that diagonal, white would adopt b3, which is the second most popular move. So to react with e5, you could just take care and then play bishop a3, or e4 just to stop black first, and then bishop a3 later. In fact, e4 is actually more popular. So the idea of getting this diagonal, trying to punish black for this e5, and trying to stop black's dynamic potential, blocking the e pawn, that sort of thing with b3 is implied. And you'll see that with b3 the structure is kind of more solid. It's prone to being well, it's going to be more solid generally than with what was played, I think, because b4 does loosen actually the c4 pawn, and if later black can arrange bishop e6, this is going to be a subject potentially of some scrutiny here. So a very interesting move which kind of takes the game out of most of theory, getting both players to improvise. Maybe that's Mamedyarov's intention. He didn't feel it was such a bad move, but one which would cause now Peter Svidler to be out of his theory for this line. But black continues now with e5, and after d takes, in fact we still have this use here of this diagonal with bishop a3, and with the pawn on b5, I guess it does discourage c6 in some variations, but there's a question mark over the c4 pawn. It might be slightly vulnerable. It hasn't got a pawn kind of to help support it from behind, so it is kind of exposed pawn, and behind that pawn on this diagonal is the a2 pawn. So structurally it seems a bit riskier what white is actually doing here. White could also apparently, I think, consider this e4 as well, just to block e4 from black. If black ever snaps the pawn, we can just play this, and this should be nice for white. White could try and collect that e4 pawn pretty soon, and black's e pawn will be isolated. So e4 is an interesting move as well. Knight d5 is also interesting, but anyway, bishop a3, and technically it's as though black has actually equalized. From an engine perspective, black's equalized here, and black is allowed to play e4, which Peter Svidler actually does. So it shuts down for a moment the bishop, but white maybe is looking forward to undermining this pawn chain with f3, so he doesn't mind this so much, knight d4, because f3 later could actually show the downside of this advanced pawn on e4. It is prone to being undermined. But now I think in this position, Queen F7 seems good, or Rook F7 from an engine point of view, which was played Rook F7. And here Queen B3. And what is going on here? Well, Black now takes the opportunity to challenge this knight on D4. With his queen on E8, he doesn't have to even accept double pawns now with his next move, knight C6. So he can capture with the queen. Putting pressure on that D4 knight is very interesting. If the knight kind of retreated here, then the c-pawn is subject to scrutiny, bishop E6. And it looks as though Black, in many respects, has a fantastic position. A move like B5, there's knight A5, and C4 is just being lost. It looks to be a real pain, this position. Also knight E5 in any case on C4. So as well as this bishop being nice on the diagonal, this bishop's sort of shut down. Black would seem to be looking really good here on knight C2. So I think it was good to take on C6 in the circumstance. Queen takes C6. Now at least justify that B pawn and open up the bishop with tempo B5. Queen drops back. And now White tries to show a downside to this E pawn. He plays F3. Now here you might think, well, can't Black do something like E3? I think this E pawn is just a tactical liability with some preparation. Although it does seem fairly interesting to play E3. If, say, Rook AD1, then Bishop C5 later, I think later it could become a problem. Black hasn't got use of these squares. This isn't too much of a danger for White. So anyway, in this position, actually, a very, very interesting move was played. Just Bishop E6. So Black is prepared to lose the E pawn here, and White doesn't go for that. Actually, if F takes here, then stronger than taking on E4 is apparently knight G4, because now actually this diagonal is pretty sensitive, and Black is threatening things like Bishop D4 check and knight E3, and that's quite uncomfortable to say the least. So the F3 pawn is important here to guard G4 for the moment. White actually played Rook AD1, and okay, it's about equal at the moment. A6. So A2 could also be under scrutiny with this line opening. What does White want to do here? He is under pressure on the queen side. He plays actually B takes A6, and after Rook takes A6, it looks as though Black is slightly more compact here structurally. There's isolated pawn here and here. Black's slightly more compact, but now actually White does in this position take on E4. So what's the difference here out of interest? Well, D4 is controlled, so I don't think knight G4 is such a big threat as before. E takes F5 might actually be possible, so that's not a concern. So F takes E4 is looking like a good move, and Black played F takes E4, and White simply took on E4 here. So after knight takes E4, bishop takes E4, a pair of rooks come off now. Rook takes F1, Rook takes F1, and now a question is put to this C4 pawn. So Black for the moment is a pawn down, but with this move B5 it looks as though Black's bishops are very nice and complementary, staring down White's queen side as well as the rook. So this looks like a very fractured pawn structure indeed, and I think statistically fractured pawn structures often result in losses at Super GM level. So this looks as though Black is technically better here, White plays now quite a tricky move, Queen E3, and he introduces with this, eyeing the Queen here, things like Bishop D5. That's quite nasty. This is a very interesting position actually from an engine perspective in terms of endpoint theory, and I'd just like to mention that here, that dynamically White is poking into squares around Black's king here, and you've also got this diagonal as well, and a kind of vulnerable back rank, and this is the sort of thing which to humans might seem a bit shaky, but engines often find amazing forcing variations which result in knockout blows. So I think it's a very stimulating position from an engine point of view. From a human point of view, they've just had 3 days in a row so far and they're both knackered. I think some inaccuracies are bound to crop in here. So after Bishop C5, okay, Peter Svidler needs to be very, very careful in this position with F8 eyed. If he plays something like Rook takes A2, then Bishop D5 is not just unpleasant, it looks to be winning here. For example, Rook A6 takes, maintaining the pin. Rook C6, Bishop B5 wins the exchange. I mean, what else? It's horrible, this pin here. If Bishop F7, pardon me, if Bishop F7 instead, well, we can just take that, just win the Queen, or even stronger, Queen takes E8 is actually a mate in 2. Yeah, because that bishop's pinned, so that's not good either. So Rook takes A2 is basically to be avoided here. Bishop D5 is a strong threat here. So Black actually now plays Queen C8. Already, actually, this is really uncomfortable. Just quickly, let's just rewind for one moment. That in this position, after Queen E3, there was an alternative to just trying to immediately restore material equality in this position worth mentioning, and that is actually Queen D7, which introduces Bishop D4 to try and pin White's Queen. And here, this is a slight improvement, because actually Bishop takes C4, maintaining the structure quite well. Would have been okay actually for Black. Black would have been standing, it seems, okay in this position. I don't know if this is tiredness or something, but it just seems quite strange actually. Queen D7 is quite an incisive move. It kind of breaks out potential pins and threatens Black pinning himself. So it is much stronger, it seems, than this B takes C4. Also, you know, from a structural perspective, B takes C4 is double pawns. So as well as leaving the pin, you know, structurally it's double pawns. So okay, so Bishop C5, but it's not the end of the world for Black here. You know, this is still about equal technically. It just seems uncomfortable now, though. Let's take a move like Queen D7. That should actually be okay here. But we see Queen C8, and here the move played looks actually like a really good human plan. Mamedyarov played H4, because the idea of playing H5 to cause even more structural damage, or to get a kind of form pawn on H6, kind of goal hanging pawn. It could form often mating nets to have a pawn on H6. This seems like a really good move from a human point of view, but from an engine point of view, it's already kind of excited that there are pieces around Black's king, and actually engines really like actually Rook D1. And there's a subtle thing about this position, that Rook D1 eyeing D8 just needs actually Bishop E7 or Queen G5 to actually threaten Rook D8, and it's actually quite difficult for Black to defend this position, apparently, from a technical perspective. What does black actually do here to try and defend? Bishop f8 may be one of the better moves. Okay, so anyway, queen c8, we see h4. But now a really strange move is played, which baffled like most people watching the game. Well, black, I guess, wants to do something about h5. It looks like a very, very serious threat to handle this h5. In fact, though, rook takes a2. I'm not sure actually is helping against h5. This just seems like a very, very serious idea. h6 here. So rook takes a2. h5. What does black actually do in this position? If say g5, I mean that's just asking for a task. We just take there. If h6, we just take on g6. Black hasn't actually got that many options here. If rook takes a2, so it has to sort of defend against this h5 somehow. I think the engine's suggesting either queen d7 or king h8. Queen d7. What's the idea against h5? It's really quite tricky. I mean, rook a5 actually at least has the threat of rook takes and bishop d4. So that might be something to do. Then g takes. It looks terrible to have this terrible structure, but this might be objectively best. And maybe h4, just returning the pawn. Okay, and black finds a way to be alright here. But yeah, I think pressure's getting to black here. He plays a move which seems to be a kind of first major sort of error, compromising his king side, and he's offering that g6 pawn. White actually just takes this, and now you know, these bishops are eyeing a lot more squares around the king, and the engines are getting even more excited by all these attacking prospects. Here black actually plays bishop d5, and in this position the rook is attacking the bishop. In fact, it seems bishop f5 is a nice forcing move here, which would cause black some concern. For example, if queen d8, then rook d1 is really nasty. Threatening actually rook takes d5 and queen e8. So the engines are excited for a reason, that all these squares, you know, lead to mating nets potentially. And if c6 here, then queen e6 check, and then queen g6. This is like end of game for black. Queen g8, rook takes d5, and we can take this rook. There's all sorts of tactics. So yeah, bishop f5 looks to be really strong. There's not too many moves that keep black on the board on bishop f5, if that had been played. What does black actually do here? In fact, it is quite tricky. If bishop e6, bishop b1 protects a2, threatens queen e4. This whole diagonal is quite compromised. Queen a8, a4, and this pawn is kind of helping overload black. Black's having to defend e6. So this looks as though, you know, it's a really complicated tactical position. But anyway, technically it seems as though bishop f5 was good there. But another human move consideration, just protect the bishop. Why not? What's the big deal about protecting the bishop? It actually keeps white's advantage anyway. Nothing's been blown there. Queen d7. was played now, and this is another kind of shaky move, actually, Queen D7, because it seems here as though Rook D1 is really strong. Threatening now, Rook takes D5 and Queen E8, and if Black tries to stabilise the bishop, say with C6, fascinatingly, this actually creates a weakness of the last move in this diagonal for actually Queen F4 to be. It seems it's difficult for Black to do anything here. If we try and protect the back row, then E4 using the pin. So yeah, Rook D1 seems a really what we can call an incisive move, incisive chess. But this next move is seems appealing as well, to intuitively just weaken Black's king side, just get rid of this defensive bishop. Mamedyarov played bishop D4 here. It's a position where Black definitely has compromises around his king, which stimulates engine views of this position, and it makes the whole game look a little bit dodgy. It's like each move is dodgy, but it's so easy for computers to play this, and so hard for humans, especially tired, approaching the rest day, and they've just had 3 days in a row. And Peter Svidler actually plays Rook E6, and now an incisive move is played here, just bishop F7 check, which transitions into a fantastic endgame, as we're about to see. Queen takes F7, Rook takes F7, Rook takes E3, and you might think, opposite colour bishops, what's the big deal after Rook takes G7? What's the big deal here? King F8. Isn't Black going to get his pawn back? I mean, technically this is a pass pawn as well, but it seems as though there's enough pressure. But there's a really fantastic move here played, which I think is probably better than the engine moves, in fact, at a certain depth, much better, because intuitively, to our human eye, it creates something we recognise as a winning trump card statistically in endgames. A really beautiful move, for me, move of the game actually, is played on move 31, which actually finishes the game. Can you spot what it is if I give you 10 seconds? We might want to pause the video. So starting from now. Okay, White plays Rook G5, so he's attacking the bishop, and this Rook is also attacked. So it doesn't leave Black with many options here, other than to take the Rook. Actually, Peter Svidler just resigned here. If H takes G5, then Bishop takes E3. I mean, it's created a passed H pawn for White, and we've also got a passed A pawn. And the thing is, these two pawns, if they're blockaded, they're both stopped. So White's got two outside passed pawns and can just march the king in. So Peter Svidler didn't really want to test this. It's going to end up in a loss eventually, with careful play from White, using both outside passed pawns and bringing the king gradually into Black's position. So he resigned after that Rook G5, which highlights the power of the move, really, to end the game just there. Wonderful move to celebrate there. So another win for Mamedyarov. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.